Welcome, Tuesday, 5 December, year of our Lord 2023. Thank you for being here for the early evening edition, the second hour of our afternoon coverage. Tremendous news going on today. But I want to get to something that is massively important for your life and is radically underreported here in the United States. And I think that may be done on purpose. It's called COP28. And we're bringing in someone who's covered it quite thoroughly, as usually does, the senior editor-at-large at Newsweek and also the host of the Josh Hammer Show, which is a new podcast and radio show. Josh, I'm going to get in more into the details about your podcast radio show in a moment, but I want to focus on COP28. Is that like something Bernie Carrick would go to? Is this like a police officers' convention, COP28? And tell me what it is, why it's important to this audience, and particularly, why is it so... Given the importance, the real importance of the signal, why is it so underreported, sir?
Yeah, so COP28 is definitely not the kind of thing that Bernie Carrick would go to. I would probably comment on it quite a bit more favorably if it were something like that. So this is the UN's Global Climate Change Summit, climate change, global warming, whatever the term of the day that they refer to anthropogenic climate change is. I mean, so it started back in the early 1990s. They kind of bounce around the world. So it started this past Thursday over in Dubai in the UAE. Now, you know, Steve, you might pause and say, you know, the first thing that you think of when you think of Dubai and the United Arab Emirates is not necessarily climate change. I mean, this is a country that has top 10 global reserves when it comes to both oil and natural gas. They are blessed to sit on a tremendous field of natural fossil fuels, petroleum. And, you know, I was actually just in the Emirates last year. I was actually there on New Year's Eve. I was literally there in person to watch this elaborate fireworks show from the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building. And, you know, Steve, the first thing that I didn't think of was green energy, you know, seeing all this massive energy going into air condition the desert to make this country hospitable. But nonetheless, you have a big American delegation that flew over there, John Kerry, who is now moonlighting as the special envoy for climate change. They created that gig just for him so that he can go ahead and feel important. He flew over there on a private jet. Kamala Harris flew over there on Air Force Two. Apparently, they couldn't even fly over together. The whole thing stinks to high heaven. I mean, the hypocrisy is just out of this world, overwhelming. By the way, the president of COP28, so they give the title of president of the conference to the host country, is an Emirati by the name of Sultan Al Jaber, he holds multiple titles. He is the Emirati equivalent of John Kerry, so he is their special envoy for climate change. But get this, Steve, he's also the director general and CEO of Abu Dhabi National Oil. It's the Emirati state oil and natural gas company. So I have no hate for the United Arab Emirates. They're comparatively much more moderate than most of their other peers in the region there. They joined the Abraham Accords and all of that. But this thing just stinks to high heaven. And I think it's underreported for the fact that they're trying to not let the Westerners know what it is they're talking about. Because John Kerry at this conference this weekend, again, the guy who flew there on his private jet, he had the chutzpah to literally call for a global end to coal. He said that all coal should be done. I mean, to say that that's flipping two middle fingers to West Virginia and Kentucky would obviously be, you know, that would be the understatement of the century. Ultimately, Steve, as you know, what I know, as those of us who are in the fight day to day know, what these massive galling hypocrites want to do is they're trying to appease the power brokers in the Upper West Side and the corridors of power in K Street in Washington, D.C., in Brussels at the European Union and organizations like that. They couldn't give a damn about sub-Saharan Africa, the Indian subcontinent, third world areas like that, because the cheapest way and the most efficient way to make their lives better is with more affordable, widespread energy. But they don't ultimately care about that.
Josh, a couple of things. The Paris Accords, which President Trump is the very first thing that we got out of, we said we're going to get up because it's so crushingly bad for citizens of the United States, which are essentially underwriting Chinese coal plants and Chinese, burning natural gas and oil and dumping more into the atmosphere than anything. If you do believe the theory that the humans have a changeover, they're the worst. In fact, was it Gilets Jaunes, the Yellow Vest whole revolt was about the Paris Accords, where the working men and women of France in rural communities had huge taxes on diesel and everything else to pay for France's basically involvement that came out of COP. So they have these accords they come up with that it's stunning the impact it has on everybody's personal life, and it's not a treaty. It's never approved by anybody. They kind of go to these things, and it gets all this double talk. Just a couple things to start off with. Did certain people there not call for not just Kerry said the end of coal, which China's opened another coal burning facility every other week, right?
Yeah.
He called for the end of coal. I don't think the CCP even showed up, but didn't they also people talked about the end of fossil fuels in like some short period of time, 10, 15, 20 years, of which even the host had to say, he was a little taken back and said, well, look, I haven't seen a lot of scientific evidence, so why would she end fossil fuel? But when they thought things like that, over a number of years, actions take place around these radical ideas they put out first into this conference, sir.
Right. So the president of COP28, this guy who is wearing this whiplash-inducing dual hat function, where on the one hand he is the UAE's special envoy for climate change, while on the other hand he's the CEO of the Emirati State Oil and Natural Gas Company. He incited some controversy at this conference when he actually said that there is no evidence that would suggest that the climate fanatics, those who are pushing for net zero over the next 5-10 years, he said that there is no evidence whatsoever that would support that conclusion. Now, what's really funny, Steve, is that John Kerry, who again is the buffoon who is overseeing the United States delegation at this boondoggle, he merely said, when he was pressed for comment on this, I think it was actually The Guardian, the leftist newspaper in the UK, that asked him for comment. In response to The Guardian, John Kerry said that, maybe Sultan Al-Jaber should clarify what he meant. Maybe he could have chosen his words a little bit better. But, imagine if a Republican presidential candidate, if any mainstream conservative, forget about someone running for president, if any mainstream conservative said that there was no evidence that would support this, all the powers that be in the New York Times editorial page, MSNBC, the chattering class, and the commentariat more broadly, here, because John Kerry ultimately and folks like him just care about what is best for them, he's just calling for a mere clarification. But the same guy, the same Sultan Al-Jaber who is wearing this dual hat function, he actually went even further than that. He actually went ahead and said that those who are actually pushing for net zero are ultimately trying to put humanity back into caves, trying to put the world back into caves, which, credit where credit is due. That is totally correct. That is emphatically correct. And ultimately, I think what the greenie radicals, the environmentalist zealots want is for the world to be plunged into darkness and for us to stop reproducing, as the Bible commands, be fruitful and multiply. They want us to stop doing that too, because humans, of course, can consume a lot of oxygen and emit a lot of carbon dioxide. And because of that reason, because of the fact that John Kerry didn't push that hard back on the president of COP28, you had people even further to John Kerry's left, like Al Gore, who, of course, is the patron saint of the pagan church of climate change, along with Greta Thunberg, who decided to take a break from her pro-Hamas demonstrations to chime in. And both Al Gore and Greta Thunberg actually criticized John Kerry for not pushing back hard enough because, again, they are the ones who are actually pushing for net zero within the next, call it 5 to 10 years. But, Steve, there is no way of understanding this push to get to so-called net zero other than just an anti-human stance. You have to fundamentally hate humanity. That really is ultimately what these people want. The climate change zealots, the environmentalist freaks, they ultimately do not like humanity. They do not like human beings. They want fewer human beings. They literally do not want us to have children there. They do not want us to enjoy the basic pleasures of getting into an automobile, getting on a 2-lane highway out on a western country road and hitting the gas pedal. They're ultimately trying to make us miserable. And I think when we on the right understand that that is the ultimate goal of these people, is to plunge us into darkness and make us miserable, that becomes then an appealing political opportunity for us as well.
It's like Animal House. They, all pigs are equal. Just some pigs are more equal than others. They like humanity at 500 million or less. This all gets down. Everything they drive to is about the carrying capacity of the Earth, and essentially, the carrying capacity of the Earth with 8 billion people. That's not. At five, as Jane Goodall said years ago, at 500 million, you can manage all the resources in the earth. I want to play the clip from Kerry. People should understand, John Kerry, when say special envoy, up until the Muslim Brotherhood's franchisee in Gaza, the Hamas war, the third Hamas war with Israel, John Kerry really ran the State Department with the special envoy. I mean, he's got a whole floor of his people, because the climate change is central. You know, you got the LGBTQ, which is a core value, and that's the State Department saying it, not me. And you've got climate change. In fact, everything with the CCP, all the you know, what they're doing to their people, what they're doing to the world, how they're instigating with the mullahs in Persia and others, this beginning of the kinetic part of the Third World War, that's all forgiven because you have to engage them in climate change. Of course, they didn't even send a delegation, and the reason is they ain't shutting down. They're opening a coal plant every other week. Let's go and play the clip from John Kerry, and I'm going to have Josh Hammer jump back in.
But let me just tell you bluntly, when the best scientists in the world unanimously are telling us as leaders in our countries that we are on the brink of tipping points from which you cannot come back, irreversible, that the permafrost or the Barents Sea ice or the coral reefs, or most importantly, the Arctic and the Antarctic may be at tipping point or beyond. Last summer, it was 70 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in the Arctic. It was 100 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in the Antarctic. And a massive component of ice that had been lodged in the mud because it was so heavy, it was stuck there, has now melted sufficiently that it's risen and moving across the Southern Ocean towards Georgia Island, and it will melt and accelerate the sea level rise of the planet. So this year, we just learned yesterday, it was confirmed, it's not when we learned it, was the hottest year in history, human history, that we measured. But that's true now of every year almost. For the last 30 years, decades, 3 decades ago was the third now warmest. The second decade was the second warmest, and this last decade, the warmest in history. So I'm not going to say more about it, except to say that if we can't hear Mother Nature and can't judge with our own eyes what the science is telling us, this is not about politics, there's no ideology, there's no pejorative against any one business or any approach. There is simply mathematics and physics and some chemistry and biology. That is what we are acting on.
So, Josh, you're a smart guy. You're senior editor at large at Newsweek. Got your own podcast, on radio show. Been on War Room a lot, talking about various topics. When Kerry sits there and goes to the end, it's all biogeochemistry. It's about biology, chemistry, physics, and mathematics. Is he correct, sir?
No, of course he's not correct. I mean, first of all, Steve, the entire notion of trusting the science, I mean, that should rightfully have died, obviously, during COVID-19 at the very latest. I mean, the whole trust the science crowd to this day, Steve, as you obviously know, has not done anything remotely resembling a mea culpa when it comes to the inefficacy, the lack of effectiveness of masking, of the K95 masks, of the COVID-19 vaccines in general. Obviously, none of the big pharma companies have done anything remotely resembling apologizing for these faulty products. There hasn't been nearly enough in the way, from where I stand, at least when it comes to litigation, trying to just get consumer fraud against these vaccines for being defective products. But the point more broadly is that when you hear trust the science at this point, especially in the aftermath of COVID-19, and by the way, we saw the exact same galling hypocrisy, of course, during COVID-19 as we see during this climate change boondoggle in the Emirati desert. It was, back during COVID-19, there was that infamous incident with Gavin Newsom at that bougie French restaurant out in San Francisco, partying it up. I mean, how many images do we have of these leftist politicians? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, of course, the far left socialist from New York. She was down here in Florida, where I live, without a mask on, chatting with her boyfriend maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. I mean, there's so many examples of that. So the exact same hypocrisy from COVID applies to climate change as well. But another analogy that we can draw is the inadequacy and the complete contempt of this trust the science hectoring. I mean, this is a very well-informed audience, obviously, but it's probably worth reiterating that it wasn't that long ago. It was in the late 1970s when the so-called scientific community was utterly convinced of the exact opposite of global warming. At the time, the big fear was global cooling. In fact, many of the weekly magazines, I work in Newsweek, magazines like Newsweek, Time, U.S. News and World Report, they actually had covers back during that time in the mid to late 1970s that were trying to kind of gin up fear essentially in the population of the exact opposite problem, that humanity was heading not towards a scorched earth but towards a very cold earth, God forbid, potentially a new ice age of sorts. So these things change year over year. And even, and here's kind of the final thing on this that I'll say, Steve, even if we accepted John Kerry at his word, which I am not suggesting that we do, that's here, there, and everywhere a bad idea, taking this wildly out of touch Massachusetts limousine liberal at his word, but even conceding for the sake of argument, as we lawyers do, let him acknowledge, let's stipulate that he's correct, that humanity is responsible for warming the earth. That says nothing whatsoever about the means to get there. That says nothing whatsoever about whether we should be rushing towards net zero in the next 5 to 10 years like he, Al Gore, Greta Thunberg want, or rather we should prudentially invest in green venture capital funds that can then do this, that over the next 20, 30, 50 years, whatever there. So he kind of assumes also that even if you agree with his conclusion, which again you should not, but even if you agree with this conclusion, he's assuming that you agree with him on the means as well. And that obviously kind of stems from an overarching Leninist, Alinskyite mentality where the ends always justify the means no matter what they are.
It's in Abu Dhabi. One of the reasons there was a big push the week before, Ray Dalio and Ackman, all these guys were over there, Larry Fink, and saying that Dubai, which is the financial capital of in UAE, Abu Dhabi being the political capital, is going to be the new. They call it the middle market. It's going to be the halfway between New York and Tokyo. This is going to be a major financial center. They're talking about it. Why has, if the science, if he can't mathematically back it up and by physics back it up, why have all the corporations totally bought into this? Not just net zero, but the massive transition to sustainable energy, right? Whether it's electric vehicles or, cutting off your gas stoves. And why have the Goldman Sachs of the world? Why have the major capital providers, non-government people, why have they overwhelmingly jumped in here? And quite frankly, when you look at COP28, it's like Davos. They're the guys really around the margins that are pushing this agenda. So why have the capitalists bought into this the most?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? I mean, at some point we would like to continue to see the fulfillment of the "when you go woke, you go broke" mantra. I mean, we've seen some examples of it. Obviously, we saw it with Anheuser-Busch InBev earlier this year. We've seen it with the Walt Disney Company. We saw it with Target when they had the so-called tuck-friendly products. I would like to see more and more pushback against financial institutions, investment banks, VC, PE funds that go down this road as well. It's worth noting that I think ESG actually is a fairly rare issue where we on the right actually have been picking up some real wins. Certainly, we're starting to ban it or outright curtail it in many of the red states. But you're right. I mean, Goldman Sachs, obviously BlackRock, companies like that, they are all in on the ESG, on the green agenda there. And ultimately it comes back to the same reason that not just this ideology has permeated throughout all the institutions, but the same reason also that the LGBT ideology, the bend the knee to the rainbow flag, all that stuff, it all comes from the same place, which is this deeply illiberal wokeism. And, Chris Rufo wrote a book this past summer talking about kind of the 50, 60-year-long capture of the institutions, starting in the 1960s with the campus radicals back then. And, those who were kids back then have been leading America for the past, 15, 20 years or now. And unfortunately, I fear that this is one of the only many ways that we are seeing the fruits of that very poisonous and toxic tree. But all I can say is that we on the right, same thing when it's the same thing for these financial institutions that go down this rabbit hole as it is for a consumer company, a store like Target, a beer product like Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch. Just don't use it. I mean, if you don't like the way that your financial institution, that your bank is handling its approach to the woke ideology, is handling its approach to green energy, to climate fanaticism, then just use a different bank. I mean, there's any number of alternative smaller institutions out there, any number of other smaller community banks that are not, Chase, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, and so forth there. So you have options out there, and that is something that is worth bearing in mind. But ultimately, I think we have to kind of use our power as consumers to make them understand that they are going to face pain, and that when you go woke, you really do go broke. We've seen a little bit, again, I do think over the past year overall, we've seen a bit of a curtailing of ESG and also DEI. DEI and ESG essentially being the same thing. One is just the financial version of the other. So I think that we actually are winning slowly on this ground, Steve. It's happening a lot slower than I would like it to be, of course, but we have to keep our foot on the gas pedal and use our power as consumers.
The term climate justice comes up. So they use the math and they use the physics to make this argument that the world's warming and then you're going to have melting ice caps, all this terrible stuff's happening, different weather patterns. And two things come up with that. They justify the mass migration in the world based upon climate change. And it's two things. Number one, you got to let folks up there because otherwise they're going to die in the places they are, and you owe it to them since you're the polluter. Number two is reparations. And they agreed to the structure of reparations last year. This year it was to put money into the till. The U.S., I think, put in $500 million, and they went nuts. No, you need to put in $100 billion. This needs to be $1 trillion. Talk to me about climate justice and how that underpins the mass migration and the invasion of Western Europe and the United States, sir.
I mean, usually when the left affixes the word justice to anything, whether it's social justice, racial justice, climate justice, Middle East justice when it comes to the war in Gaza, I mean, they're just getting at their own version of the truth. And again, the facts be damned in the way the ends justify the means. It's ultimately the same thing here. So when they talk about climate justice, what they're usually talking about is the polluters, the companies that are emitting large scale of carbon dioxide have to pay in this grand redistributionist scheme. It's kind of a Davos World Economic Forum, eat the rich style scheme, ultimately to those who the left alleges have been most disproportionately impacted by the allegedly ill effects. There's a lot of qualifiers there, obviously, allegedly ill effects of climate change. So in concrete terms, when they talk about climate justice, what they usually mean is slapping some sort of excessive tax on companies like Exxon, on companies like Chevron, on oil and natural gas producers, on drillers, on refineries down in the Gulf, in Louisiana, Texas, organizations, institutions like that, and ultimately using the proceeds to go to, you guessed it, typically kind of, urban, oftentimes, non-white or at least kind of more poorer, typical kind of Democratic Party voting groups. So it ultimately amounts to a deeply cynical, self-serving redistribution of wealth of their political enemies to their political friends. That ultimately is what they're trying to do here, just to punish their enemies to reward their friends. It's shrewd. I mean, it's shrewd to an extent that they're able to kind of wrap it under this veneer of climate justice. But again, it ultimately amounts to the exact same thing, which is the left has become very effective at kind of masquerading that it is doing something in the name of justice when it happens to be just kind of using crass political power, again, to just wipe out the people they want to wipe out and bolster their own forces. But they've gotten very clever when it comes to the names of these sorts of tactics.
Josh, how do people get to your writings? You guys over at Newsweek are doing an incredible job. How do you get to your writings, Newsweek, the podcast, and the Josh Hammer Show on radio?
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve. So we're at Newsweek.com. Our op-ed page is newsweek.com/opinion. You can check out my own show, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. Always a pleasure, Steve. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Josh, and thank you for enlightening us on COP28.
You bet.
When you talk about our sovereignty being given away by the elites, this is a perfect example. This is one of these international conferences, just like the World Economic Forum. Nobody really knows how they were created, but the next thing you know, you're a signatory. You're a signatory to the Paris Accords. Of course, the Constitution and the framers had a solution for that. You got to have 2/3 of the Senate. That means the American people basically have to come together and agree that this is something we should do. Of course, they do everything in the world to make sure that they're treaties and everything except the United States where they got to be passed. So in COP28, There's so much bad stuff going there, particularly this thing about mass migration, justifying mass migration because, hey, the United States, you're the big polluter. Not China or India, just the United States. You're the big polluter. And so you owe it to the illegal aliens, invaders, to take them in, 9-10 million right now. Massive articles all over the place about gold. Here's the thing you need to know. One, how it fits in the economy and how the dollar is the countermeasure to that. And this is the end of the dollar empire, something I've been working on for 2 years. There's 4 installments. The third installment is very important right now. That's the debt trap. Talks about all the fights we're going to have with Speaker Johnson here about cutting the massive federal budget and getting at least some sort of glide path indicator that we're towards a balanced budget, I don't know, in 5 or 6 years, with massive cuts in spending and taxes increases for the super wealthy. In addition, you can talk to Philip Patrick and team. Go to birchgold.com/Bannon. Talk to Philip Patrick and the team and ask them the simple question, hey, the people at COP, particularly these BRICS nations, why are they're talking COP, they're talking oil and gas or the net zero of going this radical transition to something that would be the sustainable economy and net zero, but they're buying gold, old-fashioned gold, at record rates in 22 and 23. Ask Philip Patrick and team, why are they doing that? And our central bank is working on a central bank digital currency. Wait for the answer. Get a big old pot of Warpath coffee, heat it up. Get yourself, particularly the dark roast, at warpath.coffee/war room, warpath.coffee/war room. Take a big drink of coffee, cut your phones off, cut the TV off, and just think about the answer. We're going to be back in just a moment.
War Room Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, you add cyber plus artificial intelligence, you give a target of $6 trillion, and you're going to have a lot of bad guys in your business. Right now, there's $6 trillion of net worth of asset value in American homes. Of course, with mortgages where they are, mortgage rates, and particularly secondary mortgages, nobody can take one out. That's why the cyber criminals are all over getting involved and finding out something about your title. Go to HomeTitleLock.com today to make sure you thwart them. Last thing a War Room Posse member needs to say, hey, I can't man the ramparts because a hard money lender, somebody took a hard money loan out on my mortgage of $200,000 and I got to pay it back. You don't want that to happen. Go to HomeTitleLock.com today. Make sure it doesn't happen. Curtis Ellis, one of the public intellectual foundational elements of the populist nationalist movement in this country and a major part of President Trump's 2016 campaign and a real leader about particularly the rights of working men and women in this country in defense against the Chinese Communist Party and what it done with the elites. When we talk about Larry Fink and these guys that, ESG, CRT, they support everything about COP28. They're all over there. And now they're announcing, hey, New York City's fine, but you're going to have, Dubai is going to be the new financial center. It's going to be the one in the middle, trading between Tokyo, Europe, and the United States. Is probably the middle. It's going to be perfect. So they're all trying to ship a bunch of finance jobs over there. These guys were the same 400. They're part of the 400 traders that were in San Francisco last week, giving a standing ovation to Xi. And in fact, Schwartzman was on one side, Larry Fink was on the other side when they brought the champagne flutes up. Maxine Albert's with us, was very close, the partner of Curtis for many years. What would Curtis Ellis say if he was here today? I mean, Curtis was a fire breather about manufacturing jobs and the rights of the American working man and woman, particularly stand up to this tyranny. What would he say about that soiree in the Bay Area last week?
Soiree indeed. As they drank champagne and gave a standing ovation, they expected the American people to have collective amnesia about China's systematic destruction of our country with economic warfare for decades and decades and decades. And Curtis Ellis knew that the only way to get back at this was to defund China. And here we're at a very scary time giving a standing ovation to defunding our own future, putting more money into it. And Curtis Ellis, I would say that he would say, well, business as usual, because it's always all about the money. And collective amnesia, what happened to a few months ago where people were saying, oh, it wasn't, we were sleeping, we didn't know, China fooled us. Now it's back to, well, let's just throw the American people to the side and go for money. And what the American people don't know is that when Xi told Biden, there was no such plans to attack Taiwan, this is quoted by a senior U.S. official, and there was all kinds of news about that. Back in China, what he said to all the Chinese people and the news media was, Taiwan remains the most sensitive issue here. We will realize unification, and this is unstoppable. But that's typical China. That's saying one thing and doing another, treating us like fools. And it's more important than ever to read Curtis Ellis's book, which details this. And President Biden, I think you need to read Pandemonium, China's Global Strategy to Cripple America, where Curtis Ellis lays out a detailed plan to decouple and take back our country with a new declaration of independence from China, based on the same principles that we did when Great Britain had our independence, to defend what's right and stand up for what's wrong. Steve, we have never held China accountable. We're doing it now for the first time with the pension funds that are finally, not being, that are finally being stopped with everything that's connected with China. But we don't hold them accountable. We have to defund the CCP. And in his book, Curtis lays out a detailed plan that involves identifying, incentivizing, and unifying, which we need all of them to do.
Maxine, help me out here. You've got this COP28. They're the single biggest polluter in the world. They're building a coal-fired plant, I think, every other week. You've got Kerry sitting up there saying, well, we can see to get to net zero by, 2050. The science backs it up. We can get there to net zero carbon, which has to fundamentally change the industrial power of the United States of America. This is the biggest in the world. We've got to look away from Lao Beijing and away from all the torture of the Chinese workers and the suppression of the Chinese people. And we have to look away from the Uyghurs and the organ harvesting and the forced abortion. You have to turn away from all that, because the number one issue in the world is climate change, and we need the CCP to be our active partners in that. And that's one of the big talks out of San Francisco. Yet the CCP won't even attend COP28. And we know from the beginning of the Third World War that we're in, the kinetic part, they're underwriting the mullahs in Tehran, in Persia, with 40-year output deals at attractive rates. The Saudis tell us that they're looking at de-dollarizing. They've done the first $7 billion deal. Now, it's not huge, but it's a start to get off the petrodollar. The UAE, which is the host, and is heretofore outside of Israel, probably been our best ally in the region, have said that they're on a program now with the CCP on their long-term oil deals to totally get off the petrodollar. So how can we even start to implement Curtis's plan and working people in the course of MAGA and the House Republicans getting back of this, when it's even beyond hypocrisy? I mean, they just don't even, they treat you like a fool because in their minds, you are a fool. That this whole COP thing is all just made up and phony, and the CCP is burning coal. They will burn any fuel that they need to become a hegemon. So where do we even start, ma'am?
Well, Curtis Ellis, he knew, he's a great economist and trade advisor. He knew that you can't have political independence while you're dependent on someone else. And the thing is, Steve, the CCP has consistently and systematically lied to us, decimated our manufacturing, took away our jobs for years and years and years and decades. That is their mission. So when you keep thinking that something is going to change when you're doing the same thing, I think it's called insanity. The first thing Curtis would say is to acknowledge that the CCP is our enemy, instead of saying we'll collaborate them and have competition. When did we ever have fair competition with the CCP? Never. I mean, the latest thing was just yesterday, they imprisoned a veteran news reporter in Hong Kong. Recently, TikTok made Osama bin Laden a hero to the youth of America. These are the people that we want to be with.
No, TikTok is a whole. I mean, that is a absolute political tool. Where did they get the book? Is the book out in paperback yet? Or tell me where they get the book. Curtis Ellis and Navarro were the two kind of lead intellectuals that first came to President Trump. That were economists in President Trump's America First. All of the backup for that, all of the analytics for that in the 2016 campaign in the first term were Curtis Ellis, and Curtis had such a unique perspective, really, of workers, manufacturing jobs, the role of tariffs, all of it that really went into the first term. I mean, he and Navarro turned out to be a fantastic team. Where do people get the book? Because this is a great legacy, and you've done such an amazing job of putting it in front of people.
Well, thank you, Steve. The book Pandemonium is on Amazon. Curtis was unique in saying that instead of doing one thing and another, that you have to work at defunding the CCP completely, because when you have an octopus, if you take one tentacle, the other is going to grow back. And that's what we've been doing. You have to completely defund the CCP and stop funding our own demise.
Unbelievable. It's a great book. What's your social media? How did it get to you? Because I know you're keeping the flame of Curtis's thinking alive.
It's Curtis's Twitter, Curtis Ellis, and buy the book, look at the book, send the book to your representatives, send the book to anyone, your friends. Curtis believed that it's up to the American people to stand up for what they believe in.
And in the third Trump victory in the second term, it's even going to be more relevant because we're taking on the CCP. Maxine, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, carving out time in the holiday season to join us here in the War Room for our evening show. This gets to the hypocrisy. It's even beyond hypocrisy. And as I said this morning, they want you to be supplicants to this. The COP28 and Kerry has really taken over the State Department until the Muslim Brotherhood attack in Gaza. I mean, he had taken over the State Department as a special envoy. Everything in the State Department revolved around climate change. Everything. And in fact, they actually said we have to put everything aside from China. And their theory is it's a great competitor, not it's a mortal enemy. But even the great competition has to go aside because we have to team on climate change. And they're in Dubai, and the Chinese are laughing at you and laughing at them. They're not going to agree to any of this stuff. They're not even going to show up. The reparations part. Do you see mass migration invasion into China? No, you do not. Do you see China stepping up for reparations, for climate damage, for climate justice? No, you do not. You do not, and you're not going to. Mike Lindell, thanks for tearing away here. I know you only got a few minutes, but the War Room Posse, what I hear all day long when I'm talking to people or getting text messages, they love the fact that you're carving out for them these specials that you give them a heads up on, because they understand some of the stuff's pretty limited. And they love getting not a guarantee they're going to buy it, but they love taking a look and see if it interests them. And they love the way that you're giving an early look. What do you got for us?
Well, we announced the flannel sheets just got in today, everybody. And we announced it on the War Room this morning. There's a very limited amount. They're going fast. I mean, they are absolutely the best flannel sheets you're ever going to use. There they are, as low as $29.98, free shipping on your entire order. Call 800-873-1062. I've never seen a product going this fast, Steve, ever. These flannel sheets are over the top. We just got them in. They actually came in a couple of weeks late, but they're just in time for Christmas. Get yourself that gift. Get yourself these amazing sheets. And remember, your whole order ships for free. Yesterday here we announced we have a $9.99 Go Anywhere pillow. You can pick up the roll and go. So you have all these different pillowcases around, all these different covers. and they're $9.99, and they ship for free. You could get 10 of them, get them all for Christmas presents. Get all your Christmas shopping done now. You're helping yourself. You don't have that worry. Get yourself a new mattress or a mattress topper too. You save on that shipping. All your order ships for free. And I'll tell you right now too, the War Room Posse is the #1 supporter of MyPillow, and my employees. Thank you all so much. Steve, we're able to actually give out our Christmas bonuses, and I didn't know if we were going to be able to do that this year or not with all the attacks on
that's
MyPillow.
huge.
But
I want you to repeat that. I want people to know that there was a moment a couple of months ago when the attacks were the worst. And folks, you got to remember, one of the reasons we're doing this is to show the left that they can't destroy one of the best guys in this. The reason we got President Trump's back, and particularly in the situation in Manhattan. If they can destroy Donald Trump, the financial part of Donald Trump, if they can destroy Mike Lindell, they're going to sit there. They're going to say anybody that comes forward and tries to step up and lead the people or be a supporter of the people, be a supporter of MAGA, we're going to destroy. And that was the whole focus on Lindell. And you had, remember it was 2 years ago, we lost Walmart and we lost some of the big boxes, but this next thing was to really strip you of everything, to make sure you had no outlets whatsoever, no retail whatsoever. And that's when you and I talked, and I said, look, this issue goes beyond Mike Lindell. And then the point was, there was a moment there you didn't even know if you were able to pay bonuses. And a lot of your people, as many people in the country do, kind of depend upon that bonus to make sure not just to get through the Christmas season, but to get into the new year and make sure they got a little money set aside to get to the new year. Give me your thoughts on that, because I'm really proud of the fact that the Warren Posse stood up, and now people are going to get their bonuses.
Right. And this all came after August, everybody, when all I did was put out a plan to help secure our election platforms and secure our election. They went in an all-out attack. IRS attacked my home reps, mom and dads working from home, and said, we don't want you to work from home anymore. They tried to do that. We finally won that, at least in one state. Then they went and attacked. They debanked us. They went after American Express attacked us. They went after us, and our prayers were answered with the War Room Posse being able to keep supporting us. We had TV, we had all kinds of stuff just canceling us out. And then people were going, well, how can you keep having these good prices? Well, they took away all the middlemen, and all we needed was an uplift of sales to keep them coming in, to give my employees confidence, and quite frankly, save MyPillow from going down. And you did it, everybody. And we're so grateful that the War Room Posse stepped it up. It's bar none. You guys were the #1 supporters in the country, and my employees are so grateful. People forget we are an employee-owned company. I'm just the biggest stockholder. These guys had not got a stock check in 2.5 years of being attacked by the media and canceled. So not only have you helped them all regain their confidence and their faith in everybody, but it's been amazing sales to where we're able to give them their Christmas bonuses that they count. And actually, Steve, a couple of weeks earlier, so I wanted to do it earlier this year so they could actually, if they were short money, to get presents themselves for their family and loved ones, that they were able to do it. And we're able to do it, everybody. So I thank you all. And you know what? You're helping yourself, too. These are the best products in history. I reverse engineer every single product. Problem, solution, and what it'll manifest to. Like these flannel sheets, they're the best flannel sheets ever made. Anyone that has any MyPillow product knows that, and they're going, how can these products always be so great? Because we look at what does a flannel sheet consist of? What could be added, or what could be put in there to make it feel better, to make it work, to be even going into the designs, everything. I end up micromanaging and then macro managing, and my employees, we all get together and we all do that. And remember, 500 of my employees have my direct phone number, because we're all part of this huge team where, we just have a passion. My passion is to help save the country right now. But I've had to, for the last 3 months, I've had to be up in Minnesota with my company because of all the attacks. And just now, because of all of you supporting MyPillow, I'm able to go out there and get back in the game to secure our elections. Yeah.
That's what they wanted. Mike, I want to 800-873-1062. That's the That's the number. That's the War Room number, 800-873-1062. Talk to one of the operators, mypillow.com, promo code War Room. Mike Lindell, thank you very much. Look forward to having you on tomorrow. Tell everybody we're glad they're getting their bonuses. We want to have a big celebration on bonus day, so thank you, brother.
Yep. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody at the War Room Posse.
You know, I want to say something about the power. You know, McHenry made it official today. He came out later and made it official about how he was stepping down. This audience has had, I mean, I don't have to tell you about your impact, but it's being felt every day. It's particularly being felt on Capitol Hill every day, where, you know, they fear you. And they fear you because they understand you're informed, they understand you're engaged, they understand that you have a sense of urgency, and they also understand that you're right. When you call in this audience, you know, the War Room Posse gets on top of something, one of these pressure campaigns. We're not asking for the moon and the stars. This is very logical, very practical, very common sense solutions to what is is wrong with the country, particularly with regards to spending or the invasion of the southern border, etc. There's going to be a lot of intensity over the next couple of weeks because they're going to go forward with the impeachment inquiry. And look, we're very pleased with that. Biden, these guys are certainly traitors. I mean, we were the guys that helped break the laptop from hell. We know the reason I was even brought into that was nothing to do with the Bidens, but my understanding of how the CCP controls their industry and how they money launder. So that's obvious. I'm glad that's happening. We're going to be on those people. We can't take a shiny toy. Right now, this J6 thing is just crabbing sideways. It's outrageous about how they lost the tapes and everything that's going on. I want to thank Julie Kelly and the team for talking about that. But that's another aspect that must get on that right away, because that's central to the 2024 campaign and to making sure people understand how a narrative was built up. And this is why they're coming after President Trump so hard. President Trump so hard, they're putting Trump where Hitler was in 1932. They're saying, yeah, people can elect dictators, and this guy wants to be Caesar. This guy wants to be Hitler. This guy wants to be Napoleon. This guy is a megalomaniac. Well, obviously, nothing could be further from the truth. But in doing this, audience, you got to make sure, and this is why we show you stuff for the Patriots economy, to make sure you don't give your money to people that hate you, also to be in preparation and health. One of the things in preparation is these Faraday bags from Silent, SLNT.com. I would not trust any of your communications. I mean, given what we know about what the government did on J6 and what they're hiding about J6 and how they're coming after President Trump with unlimited lawfare every day, trying to put him in prison for 700 years, you can't trust them. You can't trust them as far as you throw them, and you can't trust the fact, particularly with FISA coming back up and the Patriot Act and everything, that what they're listening to or who they're listening to. So get one of these Faraday bags from Silent, SLNT.com. It's the leader in Faraday bags for your computer, your iPad, your phone, all of it. Make sure the only people listening to the conversation are people that you're calling and talking to directly. Okay, we're going to be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. There's so much going on. We got a jam show already and in the evening. We'll see you back here. Get me on Getter in between. We'll see you back here at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Eastern Standard Time, in the War Room.